Tonight, back to work. Postal workers in Fort St. John back on the job. Vaccine rollout. A look at those at risk and the hesitancy around flu and COVID shots. And bail reform. Some saying Ottawa isn't going far enough. Well, good evening and thank you very much for joining us. And we begin tonight with, after 32 days on the picket line, Canada Post workers in Fort St. John are back to work. But the union says the strike is not over. The local Cup W president saying job action continues in Fort St. John to raise awareness about losing rural postal service. Babe Seguin says postal workers believe they've accomplished that goal. She says, we believe the public is now aware of the issue. Seguin is now urging residents to reach out to their local MP to tell Bob Zimmer what rural post office service means to them. 2 weeks ago, mail delivery slowly resuming to most of the country, but not in Fort St. John. That's because while most employees went back to work, the union moved to rotating strikes, starting with 4 communities in rural areas across Canada. Now, workers in 3 of those other communities, including Dawson Creek, had already gone back to work. Union members have been without a collective agreement for almost 2 years. Now, negotiations are set to resume in the Canada Post strike later this week. The Crown Corporation and union both say there are plans to meet with a mediator, but no specific date has been given. As cold and flu season gets underway, there are concerns about low vaccination rates here in Northeast BC. And we've already seen the problem this year with the overwhelming number of measles cases in British Columbia coming from our region. In some cases, vaccine fatigue is to blame, while there's also misinformation being spread on social media. Now, one medical expert says that could compound the problem with influenza and COVID-19 heading into the winter. Noah Abel has the details.
It's autumn here in the Peace region, and that means cases of illnesses like influenza, RSV, and COVID-19 are on the rise. The respiratory illness season usually peaks between the months of November and April. So far this year, medical experts say COVID-19 is circulating at a normal pace across the province, but the flu and RSV have yet to pick up.
Well, COVID's been on the rise since the end of August, and we're seeing a number of cases, increase in the rate of positivity at testing. It's very early for RSV. Flu, we haven't seen very much activity as of yet.
Northern Health says these viruses can cause serious health risks. Every year, the health authorities say about 1,400 people across BC die from the flu and complications such as pneumonia. Medical Health Officer Dr. Raquel Kling says people need to make the decision that's best for them when it comes to vaccination. However, she adds getting immunized is very important, especially for people who are at high risk of developing serious health issues.
We do see severe outcomes every year, and it's especially important for people who are at high risk for severe outcomes, like people who are elderly, people with chronic conditions, children and pregnant women, to get vaccinated for COVID and flu.
Northern Health has rolled out its immunization campaign for the season, but an infectious disease specialist says vaccination rates in Northeast BC have decreased at a fast pace since COVID-19. Dr. Brian Conway says there appears to be more vaccine hesitancy in the northern part of the province. He says it's partly due to a sense of fatigue after multiple vaccinations during the pandemic.
This new culture where vaccines are not given the importance that we once gave them, and it leads to lower vaccination rates.
Dr. Conway says vaccine fatigue has been generalized to other viruses, which is a mistake. He says right now is the perfect time to get vaccinated before the spread of flu and COVID-19 picks up.
It certainly has the potential to be a huge problem going forward because vaccines have changed the face of the world and we're not telling that story enough.
But one of the stories Dr. Conway says is being told is the higher rate of measles cases across Northeast BC. According to the BC CDC, our region is responsible for 71% of all measles cases across the province, and that's because of low vaccination rates. Dr. Conway says we may see higher cases of flu or COVID-19 across the Northern Health region this year. That's for the same reason. Noah Abel, CJDC-TV News, Dawson Creek.
The family of a Kelowna woman murdered this summer is skeptical of new justice reforms from Ottawa. The Carney Liberals claim the new legislation toughens sentences for several crimes and expands the burden of proof for bail. But, as Rob Buffin reports, Bailey McCourt's family says a lot of what they've been lobbying for is missing.
The system aren't enough for the grieving family of 32-year-old Bailey McCourt, beaten to death by a hammer in Kelowna in July. Her estranged husband charged with second-degree murder. Earlier that day, he'd been convicted of uttering threats and assault by choking in a domestic violence case, but wasn't held in custody pending his sentencing.
Any day that passes that these law reforms are not in place is one day too many. They are a family that has seen the impact of a failure in our criminal law.
McCourt's family had pushed for bail reform, including reverse onus provisions for those previously convicted of offenses involving choking. Those changes were part of a crime bill tabled by the feds last week, but a presumption of first-degree murder charges in the context of intimate partner violence, a key element sought by the family for months, was left out of the bill.
We're not going to stop fighting until we see these changes implemented.
That presumptive first-degree murder charge was part of a private member's bill tabled by a Conservative MP, a bill that encapsulates what the family calls Bailey's Law. The opposition say the federal Liberals should have passed that bill, and the BC NDP should have championed it.
The federal government and the provincial NDP are playing politics to avoid passing Bailey's Law. They all said that they would act, they all said that they would support this family, and they have let them down because they're playing politics.
The federal justice minister in Victoria Monday indicated the family's demands might still be met.
We will be tabling a new piece of legislation before the House rises. It will include certain changes around presumptions of first-degree murder. The exact terms of the provision are under development now.
Meanwhile, McCourt's family was also frustrated they'd yet to meet with the Premier or BC's Attorney General, another outstanding request until today.
I'll be meeting with the family this afternoon to talk through the advocacy work we've done together.
Advocacy that McCourt's family says is still far from done.
Tensions between Canada and the United States are escalating once again, despite new tariffs from Washington. British Columbia's premier saying tonight the province will still go ahead with its own ad campaign aimed directly at Americans. Premier David Eby says the goal is simple: to remind Americans that tariffs hurt both sides of the border. The tensions began when Ontario aired an anti-tariff ad. It featured a speech from former U.S. President Ronald Reagan about how destructive tariffs are. Well, Donald Trump claimed the ad's overall message misrepresented Reagan's views on tariffs. But Reagan said he believed in the long-term tariffs would lead to trade wars and hurt Americans. Well, Trump anyway decided to terminate the trade talks. He then announced an additional 10% tariffs on Canadian goods in retaliation. Eby says BC will still launch ads in the United States, showing how closely the two economies are connected. The campaign will run on TV and social media, targeting border states that trade heavily with our province. Industry groups called the latest U.S. tariffs unfortunate and uncalled for. They warn higher costs could hit workers and consumers on both sides of the 49th parallel. The U.S. ambassador to Canada now says a new deal is not likely before Thanksgiving. BC's Construction Association has released new numbers examining the economic and labor conditions of the industry. And the latest data from across the province shows that construction material costs have increased by 4% year over year, doubling the Bank of Canada's inflation target. The strains of sustained cost increases has put additional pressure on an industry that's already facing its most uncertain future yet amid trade turmoil with the United States.
It's kind of a catch-22 for any building materials that are associated. We need them. The building community is sourcing them. We're being creative. We're being keen to explore other markets. But all of those other markets are going to increase the risk, the vulnerability. They're not established. And because they're coming from greater distances, that often means additional costs.
BC's construction industry remains a key driver of the provincial economy, contributing 9.2% of GDP. Construction serves as the #1 employer throughout British Columbia's goods sector. The Cowichan Nation is slamming BC's Premier and the Mayor of Richmond for their comments on a precedent-setting case surrounding a swath of land on the Fraser River. While the nation is adamant that the ruling will not erase public property, others disagree. CTV's Isabella Zavarizzi has more.
a landmark legal ruling over this land along the Fraser River in Richmond, where less than 200 years ago, the Cowichan tribes lived seasonally and fished. The court decision has politicians and some homeowners up in arms over private property rights.
That frustrated me because it seemed to be misinformation that could be inflammatory and inappropriate.
After more than 500 days of trial, the BC Supreme Court sided with the Cowichan in a lawsuit against the federal and provincial governments, the city, and 2 other First Nations. It grants the Cowichan fishing rights and title to 7.5 square kilometers of land.
Our lands were taken. Our fishing rights were denied. Our voices were silenced.
The outcry has been anything but silent.
You'd be shocked to know how little the public knew about the Cowichan for land claims.
Especially after the city of Richmond sent letters to more than 150 homeowners that the decision could compromise their ownership.
Oh my gosh, it was complete shock and disbelief.
At the time, Premier David Eby said anxiety among homeowners was reasonable. Eby doubling down.
It has created significant uncertainty. It has direct harms for our provincial economy and for homeowners to even understand what the state of their ownership right is.
The Cowichan Nation says these comments are misleading.
Some landowners are under the mistaken impression that this decision somehow impacts their rights to their property. And once again, it's just not the case.
The nation says Richmond and BC's negative and erroneous messaging is provoking unnecessary fears. Their approach is inconsistent with the court's decision and is contrary to reconciliation. On Tuesday evening, the city of Richmond is holding an information session, but no one from the Cowichan Nation or their legal team is included. Isabella Zavarisi, CTV News.
Heading to Alberta now, where 50,000 striking teachers are wondering what to do next. Danielle Smith's government ordering them back to work using the notwithstanding clause.
This is not a step any government takes lightly, but it's one we must take to ensure that no further irreparable harm is done to Alberta's students as the result of the ongoing strike.
How do they feel about forever being tarnished in their own political legacies by being part of the first government in Alberta's history to override the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in advance?
The government says students could be back to class as early as tomorrow. The province is imposing an agreement that was rejected by the Alberta Teachers Association back in September. The union says it's considering legal action against the province, but is not saying what that legal action may look like. The Prime Minister is in Singapore to meet with that country's political and business leaders. Later this week, he'll have a face-to-face with China's president. CTV's Judy Trin reports from Singapore.
You have 40% of global trade coming through here.
As he surveys Singapore's massive state-of-the-art port with its CEO, the Prime Minister is reaching into his Rolodex to find new partners to invest in Canada's major projects.
Our Prime Minister is very well connected globally to not just political leaders, but to corporate leaders, leaders of significant investment firms, sovereign wealth funds.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump is being courted. Sana Takaichi, Japan's first female leader, gave Trump a golf club owned by her predecessor, the late Shinzo Abe, and promised to nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize. Then they signed an agreement to cooperate on critical minerals.
But tonight I'm more confident than ever that the friendship between the United States and Japan is strong as it can be.
After missing each other in Malaysia, Carney and Trump will both be in South Korea for the Asia-Pacific Economic Summit. At APEC, both have bilateral meetings set up with China's Xi Jinping. When asked if Canada would break with the U.S. and drop tariffs on Chinese EVs, Carney said it's too soon to decide.
There's no preset offer issue. This is the difference between relationship and transaction.
The Prime Minister will spend less than 24 hours in Singapore before traveling to South Korea for another economic summit. Tensions are expected. Since Trump broke off trade negotiations, he said that he will not meet with Carney at APEC. Judy Trin, CTV News, Singapore.
Hurricane Melissa has made landfall in Jamaica, becoming one of the most powerful hurricane landfalls on record in that part of the Atlantic. The rains are intense and lashing the island. Authorities now warn of catastrophic flooding. This video was captured in Montego Bay just as the Category 5 hurricane was making landfall in the New Hope on the island's southeastern coast. Maximum sustained wind at landfall were 295 kilometers per hour. The storm is now just starting to pick up speed slightly. Forecasters at the U.S. National Hurricane Center are calling this an extremely dangerous and life-threatening situation. The hurricane, depending on how bad the impact is, could bring catastrophic damage to coastal areas. All right, stay tuned. Speaking of weather, Noah will be right back after the break.